You could have gotten a dog. You know that. Something that listens. Something that fits neatly into a life without rearranging every corner of it. You could have gotten a cat. Something independent. Something that doesn't scream when you leave the room or bite through your headphone cable because you paid attention to your phone for 11 seconds. You could have gotten nothing at all and lived a quieter, simpler, significantly less expensive life. But you didn't. You chose or were chosen by a cockatoo, an animal that will outlive your car, your career, and statistically, your marriage. An animal that screams at a decibel level measured in the same range as a Boeing 747 on approach. An animal that most people rehome within 5 years because they had no idea what they were signing up for. And you kept it. You're still here. And that says something about you that goes far deeper than liking birds. There are 5 personality traits that psychologists consistently find in people who not only choose cockatoos, but stay with them. Traits so uncommon that fewer than 5% of the population carries them naturally. And by the end of this, you'll understand something about yourself you may have always felt, but never had the language for. Subscribe if you already suspect you're not like most people, and tell me how many years you've had your cockatoo. Let me tell you who you are. You don't just tolerate emotional chaos. You're built for it. Most design their lives around calm, predictable routines, manageable emotions, relationships that stay inside comfortable lines. You walked into a pet store or a rescue or a breeder and bonded with the animal kingdom's emotionally volatile species, and something inside you felt not anxious, not overwhelmed, but right. Cockatoo people are not drawn to calm. They are drawn to intensity. They feel most alive when they are needed at full volume, when something depends on them completely. When the emotional stakes of a single Tuesday morning involve screaming, comforting, negotiating, being bitten, being forgiven, and being loved so aggressively it borders on absurd. Psychologically, this maps to a personality type that finds stillness not peaceful, but empty. That equates being deeply needed with being deeply loved. In human relationships, this trait exhausts people. Partners burn out. Friends pull back. The world tells you that you're too much, that you care too hard, that you need to calm down. And then you come home to a cockatoo who matches every ounce of that intensity and raises it by a factor of 10. And for the first time, the thing everyone told you was too much about you is exactly what's required. You didn't choose a cockatoo because you underestimated what they'd need. You chose them because you finally found something that needs as much as you have to give. You have a loyalty that borders on irrational. Cockatoos are the most rehomed parrot species on Earth. Many birds pass through 5, 7, 10 homes in a single lifetime, bought on impulse, adored for a year, surrendered when the screaming doesn't stop, passed along when the biting gets worse, dropped at a rescue when the next owner realizes what the last one already learned, that this animal requires a commitment most humans cannot sustain for 5 years, let alone 50. And then there's you. You didn't rehome them after the first birth by that blood. You didn't give up during the 3-month screaming phase that nearly cost you your lease. You didn't leave when the vet bill hit a number that made your stomach drop, and you paid it anyway and told no one. And because you knew they wouldn't understand. Somewhere in the architecture of who you are, there is a load-bearing wall made of a single conviction. You do not abandon something that has bonded to you, not when it's hard, not when it's expensive, not when every rational voice in your life is telling you this isn't sustainable. This trait, this almost irrational persistence in the face of every reason to quit, is so rare that most humans cannot maintain it even in their relationships with other humans. You maintain it with a bird, not because you're stubborn in general, because something inside you decided a long time ago that loyalty isn't conditional. And your cockatoo tested that decision every single day, and you passed every single time, and they know it. They knew it before you did. You stopped needing the world to understand you. Your friends think you're eccentric. Your family thinks you're dramatic. Your neighbors have opinions about the noise. Your partner, if they stayed, made peace with a reality they never would have chosen for themselves. And somewhere in the middle of all of that judgment, all of those looks, all of those conversations where someone says, "Why don't you just get a normal pet?" you stopped explaining, not because you gave up, because you realized there was nothing to explain. The relationship you have with your cockatoo exists in a language that only the two of you speak. It doesn't translate. It doesn't photograph well. It doesn't make sense to someone who has never felt a cockatoo press its face into their neck and go still with a trust so total it changes the weight of the room. Cockatoo people share a rare psychological trait that has nothing to do with birds and everything to do with identity. They are genuinely, structurally unbothered by external judgment about the things that matter most to them. Not performatively unbothered, not pretending. Actually free from the need for outside approval on the choices that define their life. Most people spend their entire existence curating a version of themselves that other people will validate. You spend yours covered in feather dust, listening to a bird scream, and feeling more understood by that bird than by anyone who has ever questioned why you keep it. That's not stubbornness. That's sovereignty. And it's rarer than you think. You know what loud love feels like, and you know where you learned it. This is the trait that surprises people. And it's the one you might feel in your chest before I finished describing it. Research into companion animal selection, the psychology of why specific people choose specific animals, reveals a consistent pattern among people. Drawn to high-need, high-bond species like cockatoos, they report disproportionately personal histories marked by emotional intensity. Households where love was not quiet, where care came wrapped in chaos, where affection was loud and present and sometimes overwhelming and not always delivered gently, but always felt. Caretaking roles that started too early. Emotional responsibility that landed on their shoulders before they were old enough to name what they were carrying. A deep familiarity with the experience of being needed by something that couldn't regulate itself without them. And then one day, a cockatoo screams when they leave the room, dances when they come back, clings to them with a desperation that would alarm most people, has a jealous outburst over someone sitting too close, melts into their hand with a vulnerability so total it makes their throat tighten. And it doesn't feel foreign. It feels like recognition. The cockatoo loves exactly the way they learned love is supposed to feel. Intense, unfiltered, consuming, impossible to ignore. And whether that's beautiful or revealing or both, it's true, and you already knew it before I said it. You just didn't know anyone else had noticed. You learned to love without controlling. This is the rarest one. The one that sets cockatoo people apart from nearly every other type of pet owner on Earth. Dogs can be trained to obedience. Cats can be left to independence. Fish can be managed on a schedule. A cockatoo can be none of these things. They will not obey consistently. They cannot be left alone without consequence. They will not conform to your schedule, your expectations, or your plans for how the day is supposed to go. They will bite you on a Wednesday for no reason. They will scream during the one phone call that matters. They will destroy something you loved while looking you directly in the eye with a crest that says they know exactly what they're doing, and you will wake up the next morning and choose them again. Not because you've learned to tolerate the chaos, because somewhere inside you, a capacity developed that most personality frameworks don't even have a clean word for. It's not patience. Patience implies waiting for something to change. It's not tolerance. Tolerance implies enduring something unpleasant. It is radical acceptance, the genuine structural ability to pour unconditional love into a relationship where the other party will never be convenient, will never be manageable, will never be the version of themselves you might prefer on any given day. And to love them, not despite that, but without ever needing them to be different than exactly what they are. Fewer than 5% of the human population carries this trait naturally. Most people who develop it do so after decades of deliberate psychological work. You developed it because a white bird with a yellow crest screamed at you for 6 hours, and you sat down next to the cage and said, "I'm not going anywhere," and you meant it, and they believed you, and everything that came after, every bite, every destroyed book, every 5 a.m. alarm of shrieking was just the test that proved what you already decided. Cockatoo people don't choose cockatoos. That's what the world thinks, that somewhere in a pet store or a rescue or a breeder's living room, you made a decision. You didn't. You recognized something. a creature whose love is too loud for most people, whose needs are too big for most homes, whose emotional demands would buckle most humans before the first year ends. And something inside you looked at all of that and didn't flinch. Not because you didn't see how hard it would be, because you saw yourself. The same intensity, the same refusal to be small, the same desperate, beautiful, exhausting need to love and be loved at a volume the rest of the world keeps asking you to turn down. Your cockatoo didn't need a patient owner. They needed the one person in the room who already knew what it felt like to be too much and chose them. Anyway, like if this describes someone you know, and subscribe because you're among your kind here.